You're watching Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. We start in Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro continued his election campaign in the state of Yaracuy. Maduro spoke to a massive crowd. He told people he will put an end to the intensified economic war in Venezuela if re-elected on May 20th. Maduro also stated once again his plan to continue consolidating the public education system and making improvements to the healthcare one. On Wednesday, Venezuela hosted the opening ceremony of an international meeting to discuss reparations for slavery. The meeting follows President Maduro's proposal for an international plan to repair and protect the rights of the African and Afro-descendant community that were damaged through slavery and colonization. Earlier, our correspondent Ian Bruce spoke to the chair of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, David Commissioning, about the importance of this meeting.
So the opening session of this international meeting for reparations has just finished here at the Foreign Ministry in Caracas. This was a meeting that comes after an initiative taken by Nicolas Maduro, President Nicolas Maduro, who in March said he wanted Venezuela to help develop an international campaign for reparations for the damage done by slavery to African people and people of African descent. With us to explain a little bit more about this process, we have David Commission. He's the chair of the Caribbean Pan-African Network. David, thanks very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
What exactly are you expecting from this meeting?
This is a very, very important meeting. As you would know, CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, our 15 member states commenced upon a reparations campaign in 2013. So we launched a claim for reparations to the African descended people of the Caribbean for the centuries of enslavement and crimes against humanity. We launched that claim against Britain and other Western European countries. Venezuela now coming on board gives a tremendous boost to that campaign. People like myself have always been clear that the Caribbean reparations claim is only going to be successful when it is expanded into a kind of global Pan-African cause. So Venezuela coming on board brings the potential for tremendous international expansion. It also puts us in contact with a very important national process that we can learn lessons from, because reparations is both an outward process and at the same time it's an inward process. The outward process is where we level demands and claims at those liable European and North American governments and institutions for the damage inflicted by slavery. But it is also an inward process where we look inwards at ourselves, at our own national societies, at our own governmental policies, at the damage that has been done to us at a cultural and psychic level. So that inward process says to us that we have to do several things. One, we have to teach our people the history of pre-slavery, pre-colonial Africa, the history of European colonization and enslavement, the history of our people's resistance, all those resistance stories. Secondly, we have to look inwards and identify all of those still existing negative policies and barriers to the progress and development of African descended people within our own societies, and we have to root them up and get rid of them.
I mean, obviously this has an important political, symbolic value, But if you want to get concrete results, if you really want to get reparations, what are the steps that need to be taken?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that the Bolivarian Revolution has, it seems to me, has been carrying out that process of inward process of repairing the damage done to the African descendant population within Venezuela. So I'm saying there's some lessons we can learn from the Bolivarian Revolution in terms of the inward process, right? Now, what Venezuela brings to the outward process is that Venezuela can now play a role in taking the reparations cause to Latin America, in taking it to Alba, in helping the CARICOM nations to take it to CELAC, in partnering with CARICOM to take it to the United Nations, in taking it to the non-aligned movement, and in ultimately establishing what I call an international reparations infrastructure. Because if we're going to be successful, we are going to have to engage in diplomacy at the highest levels. So we have to develop an infrastructure of embassies, of ambassadors, ambassadors at the UN, ambassadors at the Organization of African States. We have to first consolidate that Pan-African reparations campaign, but we also then have to move beyond that to reach out to allies in Asia, to important allies, China, important countries, Russia, India. We have to make this a global cause célèbre. We have to mobilize a massive global movement in favor and in support of reparations, and at the same time we have to isolate those recalcitrant Western and North American governments that have been audaciously resisting this claim that is based on justice and legality and righteousness. So Venezuela can play a very big role in internationalizing this campaign that was started in 2013 by 15 relatively small Caribbean nations.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, sure.
So that's David Comisión explained to us the importance of this meeting for this next stage of the international campaign for reparations for slavery.
The head of Colombia's Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons Party, or FARC, Rodrigo Londoño, has urged former militants to refrain from violence following the murder of former leader Juan Vicente Carvajal Isidro. Londoño asked former combatants not to jeopardize the peace deal between the government and the FARC. The FARC statement said, "The conflict did not end, but it's changed its form of expression, which requires our consistent good behavior. Our strength lies in the collective. We cannot forget." He also asked authorities to take measures to stop violence against former guerrilla members. Peace talks between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army, or ELN, are taking place in Havana, Cuba. Colombian Congressman Alirio Uribe confirmed this on Twitter. This fifth cycle of talks will work under the same conditions as those between the Colombian government and the FARC. Cuba became the new host of the peace talks after Ecuador withdrew from the role following violence at its border with Colombia. Thousands of Argentinians gathered outside Congress to protest against President Mauricio Macri's economic policies. Demonstrators rejected Macri's decision to seek funding from the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. They say the intervention of the international institution will bring more austerity to the Argentinian people. Protesters also called for an end to the increase in public services charges.
The
money coming from abroad is not going to solve our problems. Instead, it will create a debt that will be impossible to pay off. And what will happen is what we've already seen in the past. That's why it is very important that people get organized and come out against this. We don't have to let them do the same thing to us again, when we already know it's going to fail, and that it will leave a long line of workers in poverty.
We went through this already. We don't want to go back to the International Monetary Fund. 80% of Argentinian people is opposed to the presidential statements. and that's why we are taking to the streets.
Earlier, we spoke to the director of the news website Nodal, Pedro Brieger, from Argentina to discuss the move from President Mauricio Macri to request a loan from the IMF.
Well, I would say that the first big problem is the credit problem. They are not receiving money from abroad, and for their project, they need a lot of money from abroad. So now they issued an urgent way of trying to resolve this, going back to the IMF, saying that this is a new IMF, that this is not the old one. But if one tries to understand how the IMF reacts everywhere, it will find that they play the same game they played 20 or 30 years ago. I would say even worse. We can see what's going on in Greece. The IMF is literally torturing Greece with their loans and with their cuts in social issues. So Greece is now in a worse situation than 5 or 6 years ago. And therefore, what the Argentinian government now is saying is that the IMF changed, that they are not going to implement cuts, but it's very hard to believe to the Argentinian government when we have a lot of experience with the IMF.
Meanwhile, following the protests, the Argentinian Congress has decided to stop increases to gas and electricity charges brought in by Macri's government. Opposition groups want the tariffs lowered to 2017 rates. Under a new bill, gas and electricity rates will only increase when salaries rise. For small and medium-sized businesses, utility rates will go up in line with wholesale prices. The bill will now be discussed in the Senate. Ecuadorian former Minister Carlos Pareja Yanuseli has been sentenced to 10 years in prison under corruption charges. Pareja Yanuseli was accused of illicit enrichment while he was Minister of Oil under Rafael Correa's cabinet. The former Ecuadorian president already distanced from his former minister after the case broke out. This is a third sentence linked to corruption cases to state oil company Petroecuador. And still in Ecuador, President Lenin Moreno is choosing his new cabinet as he begins his second year in office. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, reports.
President Lenin Moreno is about to celebrate his first anniversary as president. In his first year, he has replaced a number of ministers and high government officials. Now he has asked for all of his cabinet ministers to resign as he evaluates them ahead of his second year.
Regardless of this ritual, there is something else going on. It is not just about the first anniversary of this government. It's about the government's position being rearranged. The change of the cabinet not only means putting new people together, it's also about making a political shift.
Reaction on the streets to his decision are mixed.
Lenin Moreno's government has focused on reaching out the majority of political actors in the country, which is different from the previous government.
The call for the cabinet to resign showed that the president intends to implement some significant changes.
In a press conference, the president's secretary, Juan Sebastián Roldán, explained how the evaluation will work.
This is an ongoing evaluation, a technical evaluation, where ministries are being considered. This evaluation has been scheduled since the beginning of the year by the Secretary for Planning. There's also going to be a political evaluation, and from there, the President is going to make decisions.
The President's secretary also said for now no decisions has been taken about who will form the new cabinet that will be revealed on May 24. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
That's why today we call on Maduro and his regime, suspend this sham election, hold real elections, give the people of Venezuela real choices, because the Venezuelan people deserve to live in democracy once again.
We hope our friends in the EU will soon follow the United States, Canada, and many Latin American nations in sanctioning the Maduro regime. We need everybody involved.
We've already imposed strict financial sanctions on more than 50 current and former senior Venezuelan officials. We cut off the so-called petro from the United States financial system.
¿Quién elige al presidente de Venezuela? Donald Trump, Mike Pence, Julio Borges. El presidente de Venezuela lo elige el soberano pueblo de Venezuela en voto directo secreto.
Welcome back. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, or ECLAC, now in its third day, has debated on the relations between Latin America and the Caribbean while meeting in Cuba. The debate focused on engaging projects, growth opportunities, and social actions. Representatives are also presenting a new development plan for the region. The meeting will last until Friday. Two members of the political movement Favela Front from Brazil say they will run on October's election. The two Afro-Brazilian candidates are seeking a political voice to unify the voting power of favelas and other poor black neighborhoods. Filmmaker Anderson Kwak will run for a seat in Congress, while rapper Nega Guisa is seeking a place in the State Council of Rio de Janeiro. The candidates say they want to preserve the legacy of Councilwoman Mariel Franco, who was murdered in March.
The idea of the Favela Front of Brazil isn't about legislating for a single race, isn't about legislating for certain people, isn't about legislating for favelas. It is to counterbalance the power held by few people who make decisions about our lives in the country. It is to achieve a balance that we don't have right now.
I believe there's clearly a lot of demand for this kind of representation in politics. I hope new leaders emerge to bring attention to this kind of problem, to this question, so that it's just an isolated issue. What's worse, some new representatives are intimidated by violence. I hope violence loses the fight.
Doctors in Chile can no longer refuse to carry out abortions on moral or religious grounds, according to a new ruling. The Office of Comptroller has ruled that a protocol that accepted conscious objection for denying abortion cannot overturn the rule of law. This is a setback for President Sebastián Piñera, who introduced the protocol. The controller also said private health clinics cannot apply the protocol as they receive public funding. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is in Chile on the second leg of his Latin American trip. Abbas met with Chilean President Sebastián Piñera as part of his 4-day trip to the country, where the two discussed the strengthening of ties between the two nations.
Excellency, Mr. Sebastián Piñera, was a clear opportunity to address issues of common interest and allowed me to give you a picture of the latest events in our region, and especially the decisions made by the U.S. administration regarding the city of Jerusalem, which we consider to be contradictory with the international legality and deprives the United States of legitimacy as an intermediary in the conflict with its support and alliance with the State of Israel.
In Peru, a national epidemiological alert has been declared as health authorities scramble to contain a rare outbreak. There are at least 19 suspected cases of the Guillain-Barré syndrome. The disease is linked to the Zika virus. The syndrome attacks the body's immune system, causing weakness in the legs, arms, or upper body, sometimes leading to a total paralysis.
We've already begun the health alert. This is to be able to attend to the cases that are emerging of Guillain-Barré syndrome. We have 100 cases this year, but what has very seriously caught our attention is more than 15 cases in Trujillo in the last 4 weeks.
And T1 Barbuda hopes to have nearly half of their energy come from renewable sources. The government signed a 4-year framework with Green Tech Solar Limited for the implementation of a solar energy plan. The first phase will see public institutions powered by renewable energy and then private homes.
We hope to benefit from having renewable energy, and many of our institutions, including the Mount St. John Hospital, our schools and our clinics. The idea is within the next few years that we would achieve our goal of perhaps having approximately 50% of our energy being supplied by wind energy and solar energy.
The International Labour Organization reported child labor still affects 10.5 million children in Latin America and the Caribbean, despite its substantial decline over the last few years. According to their report, over 20 million children used to work in the region back in 2000, double the current figures. Delegates from 28 countries in the region are currently meeting in Lima as part of the Regional Initiative for Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labor to discuss how to fight this issue. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Hace minutos hablé con Christine Lagarde, su directora, y nos confirmó que vamos a arrancar hoy mismo a trabajar en un acuerdo.
Welcome back. The Israeli army says it struck around 20 Iranian military facilities in the Golan Heights in Syria. The raids were one of the largest Israeli military operations in recent years and the biggest assault on Iranian targets. Syrian state media Sana said Syrian air defenses intercepted and shot down some of the Israeli missiles. In recent months, Israel carried out a number of strikes on Iranian facilities in Syria. In April, they attacked an air base, killing 7 Iranian troops. The airstrike comes just a day after President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. from the international nuclear deal with Tehran. U.S. President Donald Trump has welcomed 3 former U.S. prisoners released and brought back from North Korea. They were freed after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo traveled to Pyongyang. Trump thanked North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for their release. The move is seen as a goodwill gesture before the U.S.-North Korea meeting expected to take place in a few weeks. Heavy rains in Kenya have caused a dam to burst, killing dozens. Here's more on that and other stories making headlines from around the world.
Dam in Kenyan town of Solai has left around 40 people dead and injured scores. The dam broke due to heavy rain in the area over the past few weeks. More than 2,000 people have been left homeless and the scale of damage is still to be assessed. Many East African countries like Kenya have had heavy rains over the past couple of months. Rain has already claimed more than 100 lives and displaced 200,000 people in East Africa since March. A hostage crisis at a jail in the outskirts of Indonesian capital Jakarta has ended with 5 police officers and 1 inmate dead. A prison riot broke out when Islamic State inmates snatched a weapon from a police officer and held him hostage. The hostage takers later surrendered.
I need to emphasize to the nation that we are not afraid and will never give the slightest room to terrorists or those who undermine the security of the country.
In Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad is said to become the world's oldest elected leader after a surprise victory in a tightly contested election. The 92-year-old is expected to be sworn in as the new Prime Minister after the Pakatan Harapan coalition won a general election. This marks a historic defeat for the ruling Barisan Nasional coalition, which held power for 61 years since the country's independence in 1957.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.